Good evening, and welcome to the City of Dublin's Architectural Review Board meeting. For those of you in attendance, this meeting is being live streamed, so you can reference the video or you can see future meetings via the city's website. If there is anybody watching, this meeting is being held at 5555 Perimeter Drive, the City Council Chambers of the City of Dublin. We welcome public participation, including public comments on cases. There's a way to do that. We'll ask for public comment during the consideration of the cases, and there's also a vehicle to do that online as well. The meeting for our cases this evening will begin with a staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. The board will then have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions of first the staff, then the applicant, prior to hearing any public comments. And then finally, the board will deliberate on each case. If you'd all rise, we start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Lori, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Alexander?
Here.
Mr. Cotter?
Here.
Ms. Cooper?
Here.
Mr. Joel?
Here.
Ms. Damiser?
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the documents into record and approve the minutes for the meeting held on August 24th of this year?
I make a motion that we accept the documents and minutes from the previous meeting.
I'll second.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Ms. Damiser?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes?
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Joel?
Yes.
Our board is responsible for the review of construction and modifications or alterations to any site in the area subject to architectural review under the provisions of the zoning code section 153.170. There are 3 cases eligible for the consent agenda. I think we've modified that. There are 2 cases eligible for the consent agenda this evening. Now, what that really means is if your case is one of the 2 for the consent agenda, and that's case 2 and case 4, as the applicant, you may not need to make a presentation. That's essentially what it means. There'll be a brief presentation by the staff. We will verify as applicant if you're familiar with the conditions of approval, and then the board will likely vote with no discussion. So just to explain that, I do recommend that anyone who is representing a case on the consent agenda be sworn in with everyone else in case you do decide to speak or there are some questions that are directed towards you. So anyone who intends to address us this evening, please raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear to affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So we'll start with our consent cases. The first one is Rolls Realty. It's a sign at 22 North High Street. This is a minor project review. The application is a request for an installation of a approximately 4 square foot projecting sign for the building with an existing bracket on a 0.26 acre site zoned Historic District Historic Core. The site is located southeast of the intersection of North High Street and Wing Hill Lane. Ms. Pazur, you're new to our board, I think. You'll be our presenter. After the meeting, you can tell us a little about yourself and your background. Okay. Do you want to come up and present the case?
We have to move it. Do we want to take it off?
Well, do you simply want to, okay, is the applicant here? There are some conditions in the staff report. Are you familiar with those conditions? Okay, and are you agreeable to those conditions? Well, then why don't, please come up. You're going to have to speak. Are you Ms. Pierce? Okay, if you would also tell us your address. Your address.
Sorry, I'm very new to this.
Yeah, we normally start, since I've already identified you, we normally ask though people who come up on addresses to tell us their name and their address.
Can I ask you to push the button first? And it'll turn green and you know you're good.
Okay,
Thank you.
I think I got it.
You're on.
Okay. So my name is Jessica Pierce. My address is Rolls Realty.
It would be your home or business address.
Oh, the business address is 2983 Switzer Avenue, Laner Signs.
Okay.
And then my only question concerning this is the parking sign. I'm a bit confused on where the allotted parking for this business is. And they say people are taking their parking signs, but I don't know where they're supposed to park.
Well, since the staff put that condition in the staff report, I'm going to let them address that first.
Hi, I'm Jane Pizer. I'm planning assistant with the City of Dublin. Would you like me to present or?
I
just
think if
answer
you
any questions?
want to just answer the question pertaining to the parking.
Happy to do that. So I reviewed the site with someone from Transportation and Mobility, and the right-of-way along North Blacksmith Lane extends onto the gravel that's right in front of the accessory structure in the back of 22 North High. So parking is not permitted along there because you cannot encroach along a public right-of-way. I did notice there was a lot in the back of 22 North High that seems to be private property, private parking. I don't know if I can permit, parking there, but that would be a more appropriate place than along North Blacksmith
I'm just.
or
I thought I
along
had
the
a
street
map.
or on public garages.
Okay. And they didn't get back to me this afternoon about where exactly they think their parking is supposed to be, but there is a parking sign existing on the shed in question. So I think that's why they're confused. I didn't go out personally to look for any existing signage in that gravel parking lot, but it looked on Google that it was the surrounding tenants. So I just wasn't sure if there was designated parking existing for this property, like if you zoned parking, where people park.
We can actually take a look at that with the applicant maybe later this week and talk about that as a discrete issue. That's not part of the proposal tonight. I know we're talking about a parking sign, but this discussion is outside of that application. So we'd be happy to give a little bit more guidance in the office later this week.
I think the one thing that's clear in the staff report is that's not supposed to be parking.
Okay, yeah, right, and the customer recognizes that, but they're saying they're not getting parking, so in regards to the sign, where are they supposed to park and where am I supposed to put the sign? Where can I put the sign?
And you'd have to come back for if you're going to introduce a sign again.
Okay,
for
and
parking. And
there's some other things that I'll have to come back for, a second permit later.
okay,
So I can probably add that to that, and that's fine.
I'm assuming they're leasing the building because the owner has been in here earlier. I'm surprised that the owner hasn't indicated to them where they're allowable. I would think you'd start with the owner and just ask the owner, where's the parking for this building?
Right. And I've been in contact with her and I tried to ask her earlier, but I never heard back from her today as far as like, okay, where do you think you're supposed to be parking? And I never got an answer back. I'm sure I'll find the email in the morning. But I saw it as a contingency on the list. There were 4. So I just wanted to make sure I was addressed it. But we're good with not putting it up until we figure out where it goes, and everything else we've adhered to.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Does anybody, I mean, as long as she's good with the color and then not until you sort out the parking, if you're good with the color, then I can make a motion to approve, as a, we just approve it as a consent item, or do we want to not take it off the consent agenda? That's the question, I guess.
No, I think we can just,
I think we can.
unless
I don't have anything.
other board members have an issue.
Good.
Going to vote on all 3 together?
No, just this one.
There's,
Number 2. No, just the Rolls Realty sign.
Okay, we are doing separate.
The way it's been
I think we should do them separate.
The way it's been proposed is we do them separate.
Well, given the discussion and the fact that we modified the agenda, I would agree. Let's just do them separate. It'll take it a minute, so.
that's certainly fine.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll make,
Consent agenda altogether, and that's what we're doing.
Yep.
we're just going to approve this one though. So I'll make a motion to approve the minor project review at 22 North High Street with there's the 2 conditions.
I think it has.
4 conditions.
You want to read those conditions?
Yeah, just read them real quick.
Yes.
Clear.
So planning recommends approval of the minor project review with the conditions that the applicant revise the projecting sign to replace the proposed blue outline with black, subject to staff approval. The applicant provide full dimensions of the window sign prior to submission of a permit to be approved by staff. The applicant remove the additional sign along Blacksmith Lane from the application. And the applicant apply for and successfully obtain approval for permanent sign permits through building standards prior to installation of the signs.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minor project review at 22 North High Street with the 4 conditions.
I'll second.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Ms. Damaser,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes,
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter.
Yes.
been approved. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, following our earlier revised agenda, where we were going to cover the quote consent agenda items, we'll move to number 4, the Bergwall residence at 181 South High Street. Minor project review. This application is a request for the installation of a paver patio and walkway at an existing single-family home located on a .47 acre site, zoned historic district, historic residential. The site is located northwest of the intersection of South High Street with Waterford Drive. There may not be any need for presentation. I see the applicant, you're shaking your head. Okay, you're fine with everything? Okay. All right. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minor project review. I think it was 22-118 at the Bergwell residence.
And we did have the 3 conditions, so you read the condition. Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Okay.
You made it.
We have
Yeah,
a
okay,
motion. We need a
second.
second. Okay, so Sean's seconding. Okay, Laura?
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Ms. Damaser,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Okay. You've been approved. Okay, thanks. Okay. All right, the next item is the Simonello residence, 158 South High Street, minor project review. We took this off the consent agenda, I believe, because we had to change the conditions.
Yes, we
Of the
did.
Conditions because of the
Yes,
wall.
there was new information from the applicant.
Okay, so this application is a request for the installation of a patio, walkway, and walls at an existing single-family home on a .39 acre site, zoned historic district, historic residential. The site is located at approximately 210 feet northeast of the intersection of South High Street with Waterford Drive. Mr. Will, who we've not met before, will be our presenter whenever you're ready.
Good evening and thank you. This is a minor project review for a request of review and approval for hardscape improvements to a single-family home at 158 South High. A few wrinkles, as you will see, part of the applicant's original proposal included a stone wall and columns along South High Street. The applicant has withdrawn that piece of the application. Additionally, as you will see in the photos, the balance of the improvements have already been constructed without ARB approval. So keep that in mind as we go through this presentation. Here is the 0.38 acre lot on South High Street, located between Penny Hill and Short Street, zoned historic residential. As the board may recall, a new single-family home was approved in June 2020. This included associated site improvements of a driveway, a retaining wall, and front walk. The retaining wall that was previously approved is not what was constructed or part of this proposal. Additionally, in 2019, there was an approval for the demolition, which provided for the construction of this new home. Here you can see presently under construction. So again, struck from this presentation as much as possible, here are the low stone wall and columns, not part of this application anymore. Along the side elevation is the stone retaining walls, which hold landscape. Additionally, a paver patio and stone stairs and a seating wall. And then along the rear of the home is a gravel path with a paver border. The front, the stone wall and columns, again, not part of the application any longer. This is the side north elevation where you can see the retaining landscape walls. There are 3 of them. Boulder stepstones were previously proposed as part of the application. They've been replaced with a natural stone stepstone instead, so that's what's been constructed. Also the paver patio and a low seat wall in the rear behind the patio along the elevation of the home. Proposed on the left, there's as constructed, the 2 images on the right. And then here are some expanded images of the as constructed improvements. So in the rear of the home is the gravel walkway with cobblestone border as proposed, and then as constructed. There is a screened-in porch, which was previously approved as part of the home. So the applicant is proposing and has used natural Dublin stone for the wall, or for the stone stairs, the walkway, cobblestones, and the retaining wall. They've used a Unilock Bristol Valley paver, fossil in color for the patio, and a gold dust gravel for the walkway. As mentioned, the step stones are a natural Dublin stone, kind of a larger slab cut of it. You can also see here the retaining wall, and on the right, the mortar that was used in the walls. This area is kind of away from the public view along the street. They've also applied the mortar kind of regressed in the stone, so it's not very apparent unless you're zoomed in, which I think is appropriate. So this project was reviewed against their criteria and met criteria or met it with condition. There were originally 4 conditions of approval with our recommendation of approval. I've stricken these first 3 already as they had to deal with the stone wall and columns which have been removed from this application. The 4th, which is now the first condition, is that the applicant apply for and obtain a CCPA prior to the construction of hardscape improvements not previously approved, and should also reflect as-built conditions for elements that have already been constructed. This is a normal step in the process, but we want to make sure we're conditioning this as they've constructed this prior to ARB approval. The new condition of approval is that the applicant receive ARB approval for the stone wall and columns along High Street prior to construction, should the applicant pursue this improvement at a later date. So with that, thank you, and the applicant is here in attendance if you have any questions for either of us.
I have a quick question because I did a site visit the other day. It looks like everything's done except the pavers in where I saw those chair area. Is that correct? But everything in the back, all that's been completed. Okay.
I have a question. Will the original retaining walls that we approved, I'm assuming were part of the construction drawings the building department approved. And usually retaining walls have foundations and have some kind of structural component. Is the building department going to want to weigh in on what's been built, since it's different? And maybe I'll ask the applicant if an addendum to the building, would the applicant like to come up? And maybe that's a fair question for the applicant.
And if the applicant can maybe describe how these retaining walls were built, if they were used with a foundation or if they were put on the driveway foundation.
Would you identify yourself and your address, please?
So I'm Mark Simonello, 567 Lizelle Road, Westerville, Ohio, 43081. Yes, these stone walls were constructed on a concrete grade footer, so it's not necessarily under frost line, and mortared in place and backfilled with a granular gravel with drainage behind the wall. So it is a best practice construction of a landscape retaining wall.
Did it go through the building department? Was there any approval? I know we didn't see this, but did the building department, was there an addendum to the building permit for this?
The building permit shows a retaining wall on the plans. So
But what's on the plans and what we see are two different things, it sounds like. And if the retaining wall on the plans was built differently than this, the building department, I would think, would want to see an addendum. That's the normal practice. Now, I realize it may have been taken out of the contractors, the contract for general construction, and assigned to you. But the normal process, if it was a part of the drawings, is to have an addendum filed. And so that was my question.
I believe the retaining wall on the approved architectural plans for construction were shown on the site plan. I don't believe there were any details, specifications, or anything on the architectural drawings.
We may want to, I would recommend we make a condition that the building department be asked if they need to review this, if an addendum needs to be filed. I think are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay.
Would the board like me to add that as a condition of approval?
May I ask a question? So the building plans were approved as such to construct a retaining wall there. And at the time, nobody asked for details on the retaining wall. Yet now a retaining wall is installed. And now we're going back to the original drawings that were approved to, I'm confused as to how that can happen.
What's been indicated to us is it's not built per what's on the drawings and per what we approved before. And I just want to make sure the building department, if it's different than what we saw and what we approved.
Well, we've taken some liberties to enhance and to make the space look better than just an engineer drawing that just simply plats a retaining wall on a plan because there's a need for one. So again, we've taken liberties to make that a more attractive and more usable space for the client.
I'm not disputing. And I don't think, no one has an issue, I think, with, or we'll hear, but I don't think anybody has an issue, and that's why it was originally on the consent agenda, with the appearance of what you created. But there's a departure in terms of the process, and potentially what you've done is different than what the building department approved and reviewed. So I don't want something that they haven't seen and that they should have seen. I don't think we can necessarily be 100% certain. Normally, there's an addendum that's filed to any change from the building permit.
Mr. Alexander's not indicating that it wouldn't have been approved. It's just that it's the process to submit that change from what was previously approved.
And if I could add to that, the retaining wall that has been constructed as part of this application is less than or does not exceed 3 feet. And that's not something building normally reviews, as it doesn't meet the qualifications for what they review.
Then if they're not going to review it,
I've put the condition up as a safeguard, if that would make the board feel more comfortable with this. But based on your recommendation, I can remove this or keep it as is or make a modification, or whichever step you feel best.
I guess if they're not going to review it, then what's the point of putting on there as a condition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
if they're not going to review it.
Yes.
Yeah, and it puts the applicant in a weird situation. If the building department doesn't have jurisdiction to review it,
Yeah, why
we
go
can't
through?
force them. to do
Exactly.
it. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you don't want to put it in, if the reason I thought it was valuable is if it's not built to standards that the building department would approve, and without, then, and I'm not going to go into details of retaining walls, but I don't want to question what was done, then we're approving something that potentially could fail, and there's no oversight. But, if they're not going to approve it, if they don't have jurisdiction on a 3-foot wall, but this is different than a wall like our stone walls out in the landscape, because this is holding back earth. So there's more force against that wall. So the construction of this is a little bit more critical. But if they're not going to review a 3-foot tall wall, then I guess it's pointless.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be a pointless
Yeah.
condition. Yep.
I've taken that off. So is this reflective of the conditions you would like?
And again, on my site visit, everything looked appropriate. It fit in well based on what I saw. That with the materials that were at the office were replicated at the site. So, except that one section wasn't completed yet, the paver section.
It was one thing I was waiting for approval on before I went and put the paver
money
down. So
Do you understand what these two conditions are?
I understand number two. Number one, I believe that's why I'm here now. I think everything that's as built is on the plan. So
Then that should be fine.
Okay.
If everything, they're
So
just,
I'm-
they're
so
just
I'm-
asking
we're-
for an accurate drawing of what's been built, that's previously been approved, and
so
what you're proposing.
it's not a whole separate application, just like we've been through, just an as-built drawing.
That's really what you're asking for, right? An as-built drawing? That's that's the way the language reads.
And the CZPA is actually a separate application that does go through the planning office, and then that will go to building standards. And it is a way to sort of guarantee that what's in the field and what's happening in the field will happen.
All right, so you need,
It is a two-step process.
so you're essentially saying you're going to do what we request in a different way. So you want early, are you in this, and maybe it could be clear, or maybe we're not understanding, you want before drawings and then you went drawings now of what's there now. And
So this first condition was placed as kind of an extra safeguard, as normally the applicant would come to the ARB with the hardscape improvements and request approval, and then ARB would approve them, and then they would then go and obtain a CZPA for this. So this is a required step regardless, but as they've already constructed these, we wanted to make sure that they are understanding that this is a process. So this does not include the building or the site improvements part of prior ARB approval in 2020.
just to help the applicant out, is the drawing that he has, which documents what he's done and what we're going to vote on, presumably approve, plus it's showing the existing the conditions that are there that where he did follow what was previously approved. Is that drawing adequate?
Yes.
Does that help you?
Because there's already.
It does. I think it seems to me a bit redundant to reapply for the same thing that we're talking about now that's as built, but if that's what we need to do,
Because there is.
we'll be happy to do that. I
mean,
Can
there
you
is a
repeat that?
certificate of zoning approval, plan approval, because the house is there,
So that was
right?
for the buildings.
Right. But
That was a separate piece, part of an approval back in June 2020.
there was no hardscape on that approval.
Correct. This is a separate, completely an additional piece of an improvement that they're trying to get approved.
Yeah.
So these landscape improvements have not been approved before, or these hardscape improvements rather.
Right, and it's a separate governmental body, and as you know, sometimes you have to go through several governmental bodies.
okay, so that's the issue. We need to apply it to a separate governmental body.
Yeah,
And the key is you can't go to the zoning, I'm not sure which department it is, but the zoning department until you get the ARB's approval. So you started step one tonight.
Mhm. That's correct. So the CZPA is an administrative approval that gets handled through the planning division. And you are exactly correct. Tonight is step one, and then you finish it with the CZPA, step two.
So in fact, does that second condition then need to come off there? We're going to approve, if we approve it, then the only condition should be left is the first one, correct?
So the second one was,
future.
Got it.
He withdrew the stone wall and columns, and they're just saying,
Yeah.
if you do put it in, come to us first. That's all.
If they come back for that.
To simplify things, you just have to go through what the previous applicant did. Came to us, got it approved. You can use that drawing, and then go to this other body.
Okay, so apply through the CZPA and go from there.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And those two conditions, I'm assuming are okay.
Yes, they are.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the second one, I believe the applicant, now that they've seen everything the way it is, they really don't feel the need for the wall and kind of like the openness to the front of the house. So that's where that stands.
Okay. Did we have any public comment?
We did not.
I should have asked that about the prior case, but you would have told me if we had.
We haven't had any public comment on any of these cases tonight. And you're right, I would have said something.
All right, okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve this with the two conditions?
So moved.
I'll second.
Lori?
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Ms. Damisser?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. You're approved.
Basically,
Okay.
he didn't understand he needed to come first here to get his plans approved. Yeah.
Okay. Our last case is, fine. This is an informal review for the renovation at 83 South High Street. The application is a request for an addition and remodel of an existing two-story residence on a 0.5 acre site zoned Historic District, Historic South. The site is located southwest of the intersection of Beverly Hill Lane with South High Street. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. So Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. This is 83 South High Street, an informal review. The site is outlined in yellow for you on this map. It's just north of Penny Hill Lane on South High Street, and the property runs from South High Street to Mill Lane in the back. The site was previously used for commercial purposes, and you'll see a shared parking lot to the rear of the property that goes all the way down to Penny Hill Lane. The cross-access easement that allowed that parking to be shared was removed in 2017. You have a copy of that document in your packet. And the owners now wish to convert this structure to their personal residence. The site is within the historic South District, and we see that the same zone district is on the north, east, and south sides, with historic residential to the west. This is the Giles Weaver residence, built in 1830. It's noted as contributing in the historic and cultural assessment. There is an existing detached garage off of Mill Lane. We'll see photos of that in just a moment. Please note the porch details on the slide on the left and the salt box roof form on the right. And then also note that this existing bump out would be kept with the proposal that's before you tonight. I say that for clarity because often those kinds of bump outs look like maybe they aren't part of the original structure. The left photo here shows existing conditions on the south side and the proximity to another residential structure directly to the south, and this property is currently for sale. And then the right photo shows the rear of the house with an existing porch that would be removed to make room for the proposed addition. Some more photos on the left, we see the rear porch and a little bit more of that context. And then as promised, the carriage house is in the right photo. This was built in 1940 and would be proposed for use as a home office with this application. So getting into the site plan and the layout a little bit, the existing house outlined here in orange is approximately 1,400 square feet. The proposed addition, as shown here, is approximately 1,100 square feet. And the total house square footage would be 2,373, where 1,800 square feet is permitted in the district for a single structure. For a little bit more information, we see the existing detached garage or carriage house. It's 444 square feet. The combined square footage as proposed on the lot would be 2,817, and the total lot square footage that's permitted in the district is 3,000, so we are below that. Also noting that lot coverage maximum is set at 65%, and what is shown here is 57%, albeit without patios and walkways. This slide shows some of the forms of the proposed structure and also indicates that all setbacks can be met. The applicant's also requesting some feedback on a potential option for your consideration, and this would be to detach the new proposed garage from the back of the house. This would lessen the overall square footage of the house and the addition to 1,988 square feet. This is still over the 1,800 square feet maximum. However, it's less. So the applicants requested that we consider that tonight. The separate garage would be 385 square feet. These are massing studies that the applicant provided, and we see the view from the northeast as you would see from South High Street. We see the view looking northwest from Mill Lane. And then similarly, looking southeast from South High and southwest from Mill Lane. So questions for discussion tonight: is the board supportive of the proposed massing and form and their response to the guidelines and the original structure? And if so, is the board supportive of the additional square footage requested above that permitted by code? Or alternatively, is the board supportive of the new garage being separated from the main house, noting that the house's square footage will still exceed that permitted by code? Finally, is the board supportive of the proposed addition? And does the board support the removal of the porch on the back of the building to make room for that addition? And finally, any other considerations from the board? And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Board members? I have one question, Sarah, and I didn't see it in the table, and maybe it's someplace in the code. Is there a limit to the size? Because the detached garage that's currently there would be considered an accessory structure. So is there a limit to the size of accessory structures?
Yes, so that is 25% of the main or primary structure's square footage.
Okay,
That falls under our general code.
okay.
So if there were two accessory structures, if it was detached, it's 385 plus 300, and I mean, if they had it like that, would it be
400.
too big? If you go back to the drawing?
The general code does not anticipate more than one accessory structure, so I might have to do a little bit of research on that.
But if we added them both together, I think it's still going to be more than, it's going to be
It'd
700,
be about 800 square feet.
800 out of the maximum allowable of 1,800, right?
Which,
Yeah.
Okay.
let's go back to,
Let's go back to the table, please.
And the code is it can't be more than 25% of the main structure's size?
correct. Correct, and that's gross square footage.
450, I mean, 25%, 18 is 450.
Well, if it's detached, it would be 1950, right? The main house.
Well, it's allowed to be 1,800, right?
Right.
Right.
But you're,
Right, so if we did 1800, yeah.
450.
even if.
Yeah, that's a good question. Is it 25% of the actual size or the allowable size, assuming that they get permission to do it bigger than the allowed size?
And we would need to ponder that because that's a very good question. Yes, I might need to talk to the law office about that.
All right.
Okay. It's 1,800 be 450, give or take, yeah. If we've been.
And I might remind the board too that there is that 20% allowance that you all have with a waiver. So for numerical standards, you can exceed that by 20%. So that would come into play as well.
Okay.
The waivers for what? The main buildings, main structure size or the outbuilding size? What are we talking about?
It would apply to either,
Okay.
because we have had precedent with this at another project on North High. You would have up to 20% to allow a waiver for the increase in the primary structure size. I also believe you would have 20% latitude for the accessory structure size. And the question becomes, are we allowed a second accessory structure?
Okay.
And I'm assuming this 2379 is within, I haven't done the calculation, within 20% of 1,800?
It's not.
It's more.
20% of the 1,800, right?
Yeah, that'd be 2160, 20%.
Yeah, it's 20%,
Right.
20% of the 1,800.
Okay, so it's already more than we can waive
It's
by
gonna be
law.
bigger than 20%, yeah.
Okay, so that we can't approve, as is. Okay.
So essentially, if we separate the carriage or the garage, you have two problems.
Yeah, now that we're into deliberation, maybe we want to let the applicants address this, because I'm sure we'll have questions for them, and then
Sure.
Because you're right, I agree, but we're getting into the options, so maybe we should hear from them. Mr. Taylor, I see you're present.
Green light. Thank you. My name is Richard Taylor Architects, 48 South High Street. Sarah, thank you for the presentation. A couple of items I just want to make sure that they're clear. The first is about the use of the house. It was a commercial property quite some time ago. Julie actually lived in it for a while, and then she used it as a rental, and now they want to come back and use it as a primary residence again. So I didn't want you to get the impression that it's currently a commercial building. And the second thing on the Carriage house, it probably was technically built as a garage, but it's been used as living space for some time now. It's finished on the inside. So Phil using it for office space is a matter of him putting his office stuff in there, and that's it. And it's going to be a home office, not a commercial office. So because it's the top of my mind here, because you're talking about it, interesting question about the accessory building size of the 25%, because in my 35 years of practicing in this profession, and I'm sure Gary's had the same experience, that's been an issue when we're building an accessory structure and we have an existing building. Having an existing accessory structure and then modifying the house size to meet that is a unique situation. So I hope we can kind of figure that out as we go along here. So anyway, Julie and Phil would like to move back into this house. Julie did quite a bit of work on this over the years, including putting on the front porch that you see on there now. But probably more importantly than that, doing a relatively complete restoration of this house from an earlier time when it was in pretty decrepit condition inside and out. And I think if you had a chance to see the inside and saw how authentic it is in many of the areas of the house, you'd understand how important it is to them that they maintain that existing house and the character of it and all that. And that's why we're doing nothing to the three sides of the house that are exposed to the front and the public in general. The open porch at the back, no one knows when that was built, but because it has a poured concrete floor and it has modern 2x4 construction, and the posts that hold it up are obviously much more modern than the 1840 date, I believe the house is, we consider that to be a modern addition and not nearly as contributing as the main house. So the big questions, and again, you probably hear this all the time, but I really appreciate the opportunity to do an informal review here because it allows us to kind of identify everyone's concerns here and make sure that the community has a role in shaping this project as it goes along. So we're at a very early stage of the design, as early as we could be. Everything that you've seen is all that we've done to this point. And the purpose of this is to try to kind of identify what Julie and Phil want to get out of this, but also to show you guys something early on here while we can still have a conversation about it. So we know that we are meeting some of the zoning requirements. We are under the 65%. Sarah mentioned that we're not showing any walkways or patios. We don't anticipate any beyond what's on the drawings that you have now. There's a note there that says, I can't read my own writing up there. It's a garden in the back, but that is literally going to be a garden. That won't be a paved area in the back at all. So we don't anticipate adding anything else to the roughly 57% coverage that we have right now. So we meet that requirement. We meet the total of 3,000 square feet of footprint for all the buildings on the site. and we know we're over the 1,800 square foot number for a single building. But if you look at our massing studies that we've done, and again, they're very quick just to kind of get a conversation started, we think that we're meeting the spirit of that requirement, which is to not have one overwhelming massing building on the site. And so we have broken it into several different masses and then connected them in ways that at least to our eye breaks things down a little bit. And of course, this is in the back of the property with buildings on either side of it. The issue of separating the garage is not something we'd prefer to do because of the climate in central Ohio that we're all going to experience here in a few months, walking from the house to the garage. And I think even if we did pull that garage a few feet away from the house to technically get closer to the 1,800 square foot thing, I don't know that that would make it appear to the casual observer any less attached to the house, because that would be the smallest amount of space we could possibly get away with between the two buildings. So I don't know if it would appear any differently from that. That's essentially all I have for you tonight, and ready to talk about it.
Did we have any public comments or?
No, we did not.
Okay. Questions for the applicant?
I've just had maybe the porch coming in, so you're really just going to take that roof that's above the poured patio that's there. So you're just going to kind of take
Yeah,
it down.
there are two shed roofs off the back.
Yeah.
And we're going to get rid of the lower one,
Right, exactly. Okay.
which,
So-
it's this big, long shed roof in the back. It doesn't look right anyway, so.
Yeah, it'll just be that. Okay, and this one will just be the second
Correct.
iteration of that. Yeah.
And one other thing, because I know that Sarah brought it up in the planning report, all the exterior materials are going to match what's on the house now. So the same roof, same siding, same windows, same trim, same colors, all that.
Since nobody else is jumping in, a couple questions. Why is what determines the height of the attached garage?
So they would like to have some storage space above that because this is a stone basement and it's accessed through a hatch, and it's a head knocker down there, and it's a dirt floor and it's logs, and it's really unusable for storage.
Okay.
If you can you go to the massing picture, the one from that shows the back of it?
Do you want the massing or the floor plan?
I think the massing one, Sarah, would work. One from the back, from the southeast or northeast. There you go, bottom one there. So I'll admit, because this is so early, I've spent almost no time on the garage design. The little shed addition on there is where we are proposing a stairway to get up to the storage space above there. I'm not a big fan of how that looks right now, but that's just something that we have to continue to work on as we get into more detail.
Yeah, and I kind of had the same question, Gary. Because from looking west to east, that one looks a little awkward with the height of the garage. If you were looking from that direction with that mass a little bit. So that was my curious of why it was so tall. I think it was like 17, almost 18 feet.
If you look at the top image there and just kind of focus on the original I house, the main body, the garage piece on the other drawing there is similar in proportions to that. It's tall and narrow. But again, that's not final. It's just where we are at this early point.
The carriage house, I see windows and I go by, it looks like there's an upper level. Is that habitable space on the second floor of the carriage house?
That's a great question.
Yes.
Okay, so there is usable space on that second floor.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, just to clarify, I believe it was stated that it's actually been rented out, that carriage house, as a one bedroom or? But it's not just the bedroom, it's the lower level, or is the lower? Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Now, what's the impact on that tree then on the back there?
The one that you see in the picture on the left?
Correct.
It won't be there anymore. Not the great big one on the picture on the right, the little one on the picture on the left.
Yeah, the one on the left side, that's at the back of the house
Yeah,
right there.
that one up there.
Yep. So the plan is to take that tree out. Okay.
So my only, I would say just a couple of, I mean, certainly I think the massing of the height of the back building, okay, it's not done, but it could look overwhelming as you look in the other direction, and just how it ties into the existing building. Because certainly there's historic character to that part of that, how it looks from behind, and just how it ties in. I know you're just putting a gable in there and trying to give a visualization of what that could look like, but okay, when you get more to it. So that was the two things I had. That might look a little too big, and just how that gable fits into that shed roof. With a little more detail around how that's going to, okay, if we decide to keep it all one thing, how that would look in there.
Right.
Yep.
Let me take us through the questions and then that are in the staff report, because I think we'll have more specific questions than for Mr. Taylor, but I want to start in a different order. So let's start with the removal of, and you can stay up there if you want. You don't have to sit. The rear porch, does anybody have an issue with the removal of the porch at the back?
No, I don't.
I don't.
Okay, so everybody's comfortable with that. Let's go to the second one, because I think that could be more pertinent. That may lead to massing questions. So how do you feel about increases in allowable square footage? Whether it's, I guess the big one is the footprint of the house, regardless of the mass, just as a topic.
My first reaction, we spent a lot of time thinking about massing in Old Dublin and trying to, keep it into a reasonable area. So my first reaction when I saw it is not to be over what's stated in the codes. That's my first reaction to that. No, we have the plus or minus 20% that maybe we can find some first go around. But if we look at the original 23, whatever the original number was, for me, it feels too big, because as we've tried to scale some of these things down, this starts to be 40, 50% above what would be in the code. So first cut is I see that as being too much space as the living area. Okay, now we decide whether we break it up and two houses and this, so we have to go through that. But that's my first reaction. It's just it's going to take up too much space.
Other reactions?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's again, it's a variance that I'm new, so I don't know the big history, but that we don't generally give to other people. And so, and it's
Trying to reduce
takes
that,
up a lot. Yes, exactly. I'd like to see it smaller.
Please do.
One of the reasons why we're over, and I'll point out that we have a 1-car garage, not a 2-car garage, so we're making a fairly big sacrifice in that regard. But one of the reasons that we're over, and Sarah, can you go to the site plan drawing, please? A couple of the rooms in the house are pristinely historic right now, especially the front room that we're proposing to use as the dining room. Up there, it's really too big for a dining room. I drew a really big table in there with 8 chairs on it. But that room is all exposed logs. It's an original brick fireplace. It's original floors, like most of the rest of the house. The foyer is the same way. So we're trying to not touch those rooms, and we're trying to not touch the second floor either, because it's mostly historic. And that kind of takes a lot of that space out of our calculations for being able to add onto the house. So the rest of this is just trying to get as much stuff in the existing house as we can and only add what we need to add. If you look, we've got a very tiny mudroom. We've got the master bedroom's not very big. The bathroom is kind of crammed in there. And then really the only living space on the first floor is just that family room there. So I think we're giving them the basics that they need for a habitable single-family home in the least amount of space we possibly can, given that we can't reuse some of that existing space there without destroying it.
Mike, Marty, do you have any feelings about the square footage issue?
Well, I tend to think that I also am concerned about the exceeding our limit. And looking just at your floor plan and the amount of linear space for the garage and also for the family room just seems like there might be an opportunity there to reduce the size in order to meet basically, it looks like you need to get down about 200 square feet. Yeah, 200 square feet. 2160.
Mike, or do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I just don't feel comfortable going outside of what our ability to, accept a waiver for that. So I would think that's definitely one thing we need to consider.
I feel a little differently because I'm worried the size of this house and the size of the adjacent house. I think the cost to make these, to remodel these houses and it is substantial, that I think a little more latitude, maybe not where it is now, and I have some other issues we'll talk about, but I definitely would be fine with the 20% personally, because I think to really make these structures work, they need more square footage, and they need to distribute the cost of the construction over more square footage. And I think it's just kind of the reality of what it costs to do these projects. And I think I'm not, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those other issues. I too think there are ways that we could reduce that number. But personally, I would feel like the 20% for me would be fine. And I don't know if we go a little beyond that, that's a variance that we have to make a recommendation of approval to the BZA or how that works. But I think for me, some latitude on that 1,800 is important, at least for me, at least 20%.
Sarah, did I hear you say that the neighboring house is beyond the 1,800 limit?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, I thought I
I
heard
do
somebody
not
say that.
know. The house directly to the south is currently for sale.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we don't know about any. of
We
the
do
neighboring
not
houses.
know.
Okay. For some reason, I thought I heard that.
I did reference that because long ago it came before us, and I think there are ways to make that house work too. But that's just my feeling on the square footage. Okay, well, let's talk about the garage, because I want to back into the massing and form.
Can I just, I'm sorry, can I add on to that last question just a little bit? At the very early stage that this is at, it's a hand sketch. Square footages aren't highly accurate. They're close, but they're not highly accurate. And typically what I find is when we throw this on the computer and tighten things up, the square footage will come down somewhat. Not a couple hundred square feet and not 20%, but it'll come down somewhat. So it's probably in the end going to be a little bit smaller than this. The other thing that isn't in these calculations is if we take the square footage of the footprint that's there right now, and then only add what is above that, that number in terms of the actual added square footage is less because we're taking the porch off and then adding space back on, if you follow my thinking there. So
But the space you're taking off is right exterior space, right? Am I understanding that correctly? You're taking off, so
still it counts as the footprint.
it granted, okay, yeah.
I'm just saying, in a weird way of thinking about it, we're not adding as much space as it seems like. But and then lastly, you're right. These projects are expensive. You're familiar with my other 3 recent projects here, and my clients and the other clients I've had in historic Dublin really want to. They're coming from New Albany. They really want to come here. They really want to live in this area. The city's done a great job of making this an attractive part of the city to be in, and there's certain things that you have to have in a single family home to make it livable. And in the case of Phil and Julie and other people my age, a first floor bedroom and bathroom is essential. If we could jam this in the second floor and get away with it, we'd cut the square footage down, but then it would be useless to them. And that's, as you know, it's the case of my other 3 clients down here too. They're all of my advanced age and want to live on the first floor of their homes. So those are my arguments in favor of having the house larger than the code allows in that sense. And again, I think that we're still meeting the spirit of that requirement, which is not to have one big massive house. It's to have pieces on there and have it broken up visually.
Well, this next one, we may have more of a discussion about the spirit.
Yeah,
So
That's my argument.
okay, let's talk about the garage. We've all feel the square footage needs to come down. So before, I'm going to ask you a question about the garage. Do you ever consider an addition to this structure where the garage is back there as a part of the earlier carriage house? I know that's a longer walk.
First thing out of the box is
Yeah, I know, but you know, it's an older community, and this isn't the Bergwell's lot. You know, this lot has other limitations to it. Let's talk about that garage, because I think we all say the square footage has to come down. We're not designing it, but the obvious thing, because it's been asked, is move the garage. Do we allow it to have a second? I see some opinions already. A second detached structure on the property. So feelings about that.
Well, and again, I was going to bring about with I think it was a pergola or something was going to come off the outside of the carriage house. I'd seen it when I was there. There was that looked pretty good size. It was covering quite a bit of space there. So I know that was going to come down as part of the construction.
correct.
And again, there's space there. I kind of like Gary's idea. Maybe that can be hitchhiked to that. I think we've already discussed the mass or the height of the garage, but that won't help the footprint in regards to trying to reduce that down a little bit, or can ultimately that become more storage as well in that portion adding to the carriage house. So, but I think if there is any opportunities, I think that's maybe where because I agree with you, you need, I'm at that point too. Everything needs to be down the first floor. Got to be able to get around, and I agree that's very important to have that, because the second level of an older home is not going to be functional for that type of stuff. But I think if there's opportunities, it kind of seems what's besides the carriage house and can that garage maybe be moved out that way too? So just a thought.
So I appreciate that, and we'll definitely talk about that. But what I'd throw back at you is if we detach the garage from the house and attach to the carriage house, the number of square footage of building on the site's the same. We've just moved it from one to the other
One side or the other.
to meet a math table.
But I think there's a big difference spatially, because that's where I think it's not just making the math work, but it's spatially matching the pattern that you expect in a historic district. So that's why I would step in, and whether that garage is detached further back than a few feet, whether that garage is detached as a second structure, because we have buildings that have a privy and then they have a storage structure behind it. So they have multiple volumes behind it. Or whether it's attached to the carriage house, because a lot of these houses, you have a space behind the house that's kind of the free space that runs between the properties. And then there's a little bit more massing back at the alley. So I do think, yeah, we'd be playing a little bit more than a numbers game, because I think we'd be getting the spatial character that you would expect in a historic district. I think it would help the massing too, because I think even, a lot of us have asked you questions about that garage. It just the addition right now, you said it's just rough, it's just raw, but it may help you with the massing too. But that's just my thought.
Well, in my mind, if you were going to rank by preference the garage location, the first would be what we have. Second would be detached from the house at some distance. And I think in a distant third would be attaching it to the carriage house. So. Yeah.
Can we go
That was
back
my
to the floor
comment to
plan?
Mr. Jewell, was about attaching it.
I'm sorry, could we go back to the floor plan on the screen? Because I have a question on that garage. As you have it proposed, I think it was, it looks like, pardon my spectacles, but it looks like 24 by 11 feet. And you said it was a one-car garage. But isn't that really a very long garage?
Well, the stair takes up some space at the front, and then we're giving them room for a lawnmower and trash cans and lawn tools and things like that. So 24 feet deep is kind of standard size length of a garage for a full-size car. So we're figuring on a medium-sized car and a little bit of room for stuff in there.
So I'll come back to you. So that's the same point I had. I mean, if we're going to break up the massing a little bit, moving the garage west for me is one way to help break up the massing. Now, okay, is there two outbuildings? Okay, we have to sort through that a little bit. But I'm actually, as Gary said, I think it helps as we talk about how the gable fits into the back, and I think it would help. And we have had people come and say, okay, now we have all these long buildings that are solid, right? And how can we break it up so it looks more historic in how the buildings were put on there? So I think that'd be it's one way to break up mass.
We have had some feedback
Yeah.
from other projects that have been approved. So, and I think you understand
Sure.
the drift here. Yeah.
So for me, that would be one way, if it's a few feet or I'm okay, I'd have to see what the visually would look like. I know it's certainly, how would it look so you could get down there when it's pouring down rain? Okay. Some logistical challenges there too. So
So I know you have a few more questions to address, but just kind of instant feedback here, so that we can think about how we're going to proceed with our next iteration here. I'm not holding you to this, I'm just asking. What's more important, is the number that we're talking about or the massing? Because I've heard both. Or is the answer to that yes?
yes, for me, it's yes, right? I mean, you got to find a way to kind of, the code sits there to make consistency. You have this plus or minus 20%. And to Gary's point, you have to make it so that somehow you can pay for the space, right? I mean, we all get that you somehow have to make the project viable. But I think it's a bit of both. We want to make sure that you put a nice structure on there that fits the people's needs that they have. But certainly from a historic district, there's feedback coming that, okay, it needs to still fit inside of what the massing looks like, stays inside of your project budget and what it should be. And then certainly it has to feel historic where it is. So yeah, the answer, okay. It's a bit yes, right? Yeah.
Let me ask Hillary, do you have anything to add? Do you want to add anything?
No, Gary really covered it.
Because we haven't really talked about, we've talked about the other three questions, the garage separate, removal of the porch, the square footage, just we've touched on the massing and form. Is there, because you ask us which one's more important. So I just want to see if there's more direct feedback on that from board members on the massing and just the shapes. I think a couple of us asked about the height of the garage. So you've heard that. Are there any other questions about the massing? You've done a nice job of keeping it low. I mean, and you know what our code says. It should be subordinate.
As I said, it still needs work, but
it should be subordinate to the structure.
Yeah, and again, too, we've got a little leeway. I think it sounds like we're okay with a little bit of leeway to help, but it's too far outside our leeway at this point.
Marty, you have anything?
I think. Historically, how many of these properties have we added more than one outbuilding or structure?
We have not added more than one since I've been on. So it would be a new precedent. But we have older structures that do have, some of them we've allowed people to remove, some block garages and things that do or did have multiple outbuildings behind. And the building next to it has this, you probably saw that neat little structure that probably would need to be relocated on the site if that house is developed. But this would be a first. But that doesn't mean it's not, it potentially potentially could still have merit, even though I think, and I just want to say this loud and clear, we've got a lot, and I know you're massing, you're being sensitive to the argument of the long building, because you're trying to break it up. and I know you're, because you have clients that want the attached garage, but we have a community that's saying these buildings are getting too, these houses are getting too, and, and it's an issue here. And I realize you're in a hard place because this is a small lot. This may be one of the smaller lots you've worked on recently, so.
What about consideration of leaving the garage attached, but reducing its size so that the overall mass of the structure is less, but then adding the storage piece to the existing structure, or a separate outbuilding for storage, or just adding on to the existing garage that was there, the one that's been.
I think it's
basically
worth
turned.
considering that. I think what I'm getting is that you're saying there's a chance. So we need to do some work with this. And I think we're going to have, when we sit down to discuss this, I think we're going to have a lot of things to talk about. I think you've given us a lot of different options for how we approach this. And, the first one that I'm going to work on is tightening up the square footage of the house as much as we possibly can. We've had a survey done since we started this, so we have some little bit more accurate numbers that we can start to apply to this and really get it tightened up. We'll start with that, and then we'll work on some other options, and we may come back with a couple of different options.
I certainly am sympathetic to wanting to keep the garage attached to the house. I would prefer that myself, but
I've lived in both, and I prefer the attachment.
yeah. But on the other hand, there may be, as far as an opportunity to make the whole mass smaller, that might be another way.
Give it a shot.
Do you feel like you've gotten enough input here on
Yeah,
those 4 questions?
Really appreciate it. Great feedback and lots of stuff to think about.
You want to
So,
just
thank
maybe
you.
summarize kind of what we.
All right.
just,
Maybe we'll go through the discussion questions. I think the first one, I think we have issues with the overall massing of the structure. And I think the length is probably the big one, and maybe the height of the garage. Second one, we haven't all explicitly stated this, but there's some support on the board for going beyond the 1,800 square foot limit on the house. So I think that's an option that's not closed to you at this point. If not, is the board supportive of a new garage? Well, let's talk about that one, because I think, I said I was, but I don't know.
I'm personally okay with if somehow we can find a bit of a better map. I'm actually okay. I have to say, as you said, ranking. At some point, I think there's a hard limit to square footage.
Yeah.
Okay, where it actually is. And the other things, I think I feel flexible about how we try to help make sure the thing fits.
Your first 3 questions are really strongly related.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I want to get everybody's feedback on this, because this is an important one. If how people would feel if they did come back with a proposal with that garage removed.
I mean, one, yes, I think it'd be great to keep it attached if that's possible, if you could able to work that out. I think we gave you some alternatives. Option 2 then is detaching the garage if that's what is necessary to do that, or keep the garage and find storage somewhere else on the property and by the carriage house. But I think my preference, if it's worked out, I think it's best to keep the garage attached to the house at this point. It's my opinion.
I don't think it can solve the problem, the other
No.
square footage issues at all,
Right.
but that's for another day.
And we could just kind of, and for maybe just for staff, can we just clarify the 2 outbuildings with legal or whoever, just to make sure we aren't in a weird place in the code about if 2 are allowed.
We will look into that.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be my concern, is what's allowed. And also, how far away it is, how cluttered, it's not a large lot. So when you start getting 3 buildings, is that going to look, I sound like an interior designer, but cluttered.
Fair
And it's actually, that would be a subset of the massing issue, I suppose.
It's just, okay, where the mass is occurring, is it the back of the lot or the?
Right, yeah, or is it, just with, how many outbuildings you're allowed, accessory buildings, we're not sure. Okay.
I,
And then the question is, you're allowed so many square foot, that is a percentage of the main building, of the primary structure. Do both of those buildings count? Does one count? It's all of that. Yeah.
okay, so there are a lot of questions, zoning questions that have to be worked out, but there's some openness to that. I think we're all fine with the removal of the back porch. I don't think that's an issue for us, so. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Please, if you would come up and identify yourself, sure. Sure. Sure.
Do you, wait, before you do, you didn't swear in earlier? Okay, so
Okay.
Gary, do you want to swear him in?
Okay, yeah, I have to swear him in. Would you first identify yourself and your address?
I'm sorry?
Would you identify yourself?
No, I just want to make some comments. And I
Identify,
appreciate that, Rich. So
identify yourself and your
my
address.
name is Philip S. Renaud,
Okay,
and I live at 7534 King George Drive in New Albany, Ohio.
okay, and now I have to swear you in. Do you
And
swear?
I'm the owner of the property along with my wife, Julie.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board?
I do.
Okay.
So thank you very much. One, I want to acknowledge and thank everybody on this board for allowing us to be considered to bring this historic property back to the state that it needs to be. Okay, it's a beautiful property. We want to move back to Dublin, Ohio from New Albany. We love the property. We love the area. And I want to acknowledge and thank you for the opportunity to do this work. But I think it's very important for us. It's a small home, isn't it? Right? We're going to live there. We need to have a footprint that we can kind of live in. I don't really want to run upstairs anymore to the bedroom. Sure, Chairman Alexander and the rest of you can appreciate that. So what we're trying to do is put the bedroom on the first floor. It's not a huge bedroom when you look at the footprint, okay? It's really important for us to make sure that this home kind of meets the historical standards. I grew up in New England. I grew up just outside of Newport, Rhode Island, where we had homes from the early 1700s, and appreciate the beauty of the home and what we're trying to accomplish. I think if we start messing with the carriage house and doing all those kinds of things, we're going to ruin, from my opinion, the integrity of the property and the visual look of the property and its historic nature. Again, your decision on that, but what we're trying to do is to make sure that the property meets its historic standards and looks its very best for the citizens of Dublin. And as people come by, we can have pride in what we're doing here and building out for the city of Dublin. That's important to us. So thanks for your time and appreciate your guidance and direction. And what you will see there will be something that everyone will be proud of, ourselves included. So thank you for your time and appreciate your interest.
Thanks. We look forward to seeing you again. Yep.
Good.
Okay. All right, so what we have left, communications. And I would like you, as part of this, Sarah, to introduce your new staff members and have them, I'll prepare them, have them tell us a little bit about themselves.
Yeah, we've got a couple of new staff members here for you to meet. We have Jane, who is our planning assistant, and then Chris, who's a planner too. Jane is a little bit newer to us. Chris has been here probably about a year now, and maybe they'd like to come up and just say a brief word or two.
Good evening again. I've been here before, so I know I've met some of you, and then at our board and commission training there as well. I've been with the city for a little over a year now. I came from MKSK most recently, but spent about 10 years in planning and engineering. I live in the Marysville, Union County area. Love Dublin. Came through here my whole life, so strong appreciation for its values and commitment to planning. So Thanks.
All right, thanks.
Good evening again. I'm Jane Pizer. I am a graduate student at Ohio State, doing my master's in city and regional planning. And I just began my degree in August. So really happy to be here.
Okay, great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Sarah, can I ask you one question before just more generic question? Just,
course.
It's in, for structures to get built without approval. That's not right. I mean, that's right.
Without benefit of approval.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. I'm trying to, what's the word I'm looking for here? What's in the background? I mean, so if something is found in this way, just wherever it is, because we've had a few where we've had to go back and think about tearing stuff down and all these things. So just when that's found, I mean, right now it feels like the process was pretty straightforward. Okay, you come back, we're gonna cycle the process in another way. Is there other things in there where that could go? I mean, I guess if this was poorly done, you could take it out. But generally, when you see
Right.
stuff like that, we're just going to start the process over, reapprove it, and move on.
We're going to do our very best to bring them into compliance through the proper process, even if it's after the fact. The last thing we want to do is have people tear things out if it's not necessary. Now, if, for example, and this is the reason why we put that very specific second condition on that front wall, if they decided tomorrow, tonight, they're saying they don't want to build the wall. And if they said tomorrow the wall suddenly showed up, we wanted to make that abundantly clear that there is a process for that. And of course, this was all explained to them prior to even the application, that there is a process, and before you construct, you need approval.
Yeah. So I certainly know you're doing things and things change. Like the wall, I think, was there in the original. So I know things change and things can slip through the process, let's say. But okay, so essentially that's always going to be the method. We're going to try to approve it. Gary's point that somewhere in building standards didn't approve it, then it's going to churn through other places. But if it did that, we as Gary said, we would approve. Theoretically, if there was something bigger, building standards would then have to get involved. And if there was an
That's
issue,
right.
that would be the flow. Yeah. Okay.
If there's an unsafe condition, or something that did not comport with the building code, then we would absolutely take care of that. In this instance, we believe that is not the case. And so we're
It would go the other
always,
way first, right? Could normally it would be building code, and then it wouldn't come if it was let's say, structurally unsound for whatever reason. It would stop at building code, and something would happen there.
absolutely,
Yeah,
and that's an entirely different matter. Yes.
okay, yep.
Yes.
Well, not to belabor this, but the reason I brought that up is when the contractor was initially here with the project, he was talking about a very different kind of retaining wall.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, he was
he was talking about a very different kind of retaining wall. And that's a retaining wall that has a full depth foundation that's engineered by the structural engineer that's doing the plans of the house. So it's very different from a structural and safety point of view from what's being proposed. So that's why I brought that point up, because these kind of retaining walls, when they're used to hold earth back, when we design a wall, you put something in for lateral stability. There's usually reinforcing steel. In a stone wall like this, there is no reinforcement in there. So this has a greater likelihood of failing than what the contractor originally said he was going to do, what was on the drawings. So that's why I brought that up. It sounds like there's a process for the building department as part of the next step to review this. But in fairness to the applicant, this happens all the time. The landscape contractor is the last person in. Nobody tells them anything, and they're not used to getting permits. So I sympathize a little bit with him, what's happened to him, because it happens all the time. And this wall looks great, is a lot less costly than what the contractor was proposing to do. So, and the story on that one.
make sure that goes to that process.
Sean brought up a question earlier that I wanted to revisit. I didn't want to do it during that case. Why does the logo count as a color? You remember we were having that discussion?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
that
like,
was-
what, remind us what the logic of that is.
Oh, that was before my time, so I am not sure I can say about
Just, I was
the
trying to-
logic.
mean,
But I think,
what it says.
Especially when that logo was the same color as the rest of it. So the way I count colors, it had 2 or 3, not 4.
That's the discussion we had. But it's.
Okay,
It's
okay,
clear.
well,
That's-
maybe
that's
if
what
you
it
could,
says.
because we
It's
didn't
very
touch.
clear in there.
When
so.
we redid the code, we did not touch any with the signs. So not saying we redo it, I'm just saying if we get an explanation, that would be helpful for us.
Okay.
Because we'll
I
be,
can certainly look into that.
okay.
Yeah.
And
I'm guessing it was actually supposed to originally be beneficial to the sign applicant because they would get more, normally the color is not the same as the board. So I'm guessing originally it said, okay, if you have 4 colors in your logo, that's only one, right? So I think in this case, it counted slightly against them, but in general, it probably is beneficial.
I think Taylor has a little bit of insight.
Ooh, wow, yes.
Yeah.
You shall receive.
okay.
All right. Hi, good evening. So in terms of the logo and the colors associated with that logo, counting a logo as a single color is really to benefit the applicant because in certain instances with branding and colors associated with a logo, and if there's a version of a particular business where they can't modify their colors because it's so important to their branding and their imagery, rather than counting that color against them, it's just counted as one color. As an example, yeah.
It's interesting that if it's not a color that's duplicated in the other, it still counts as a separate color, even if it's a duplicate of what's the other colors.
Yeah, and in some instances that it can be the same colors, but we have to kind of apply it very generally and assume that there might be a logo that comes forward where that might not be the case.
It came up in the pop-up sign too. And I didn't understand it then. Now it made much more sense to me. But that was the same issue. That logo has multiple colors in it. So there it benefited them, but it was the same colors on purpose in the rest of the sign. So, okay.
The last question I had, and I was asking Hillary about this before the meeting because she deals with a lot of organizations and boards, and she's a lawyer. And because our consent agenda process is a little different in settings where I've been in, where there's a consent agenda. You vote. We don't even have any kind of presentation. It's just here are the cases, motion, all those cases at one time. But that's not the way we present it in our agenda or the way that we've been doing things. So I wanted to hear from an expert, and Marty, as a lawyer, you may have some feedback too, so.
A consent agenda, normally, at least in my experience, it's actually presented as a spreadsheet, and you've got 100 odd things, and it's usually administrative. It's no deliberation is required, and no discussion is required. These have substance to them, and so they're not really consent agendable. If that's a word. They're not generally wouldn't be appropriate for a consent agenda. Yeah, Marty's right. If it was a budget thing or, I'm trying to think what this board would even do, but it's, some of the boards I represent are the pension funds where they have, 100 applicants to be a member of the pension, and it's all wrote. Yeah, they have their 20 odd years in or whatever it is, their retirement or their disability. It's just a spreadsheet. They get the materials, the board members get the materials in advance, they review them, and they approve any of them. As you guys were going through this exercise, any one board member can request to have a particular item removed from the consent agenda if they want to discuss it based on what they saw. But these are more appropriate they can be done quickly. There's no reason that you have to do a presentation for any of our cases, but they really shouldn't be a consent agenda.
Well, I would like to echo the fact that I don't really think we are saving time, significant amount of time, that it's cleaner to the public perhaps if we take each one separately and just approve it quickly. There are either no conditions or a few conditions, and the applicant has already agreed to all the conditions. But just as what happened tonight, where we had 3 and it actually went to 2, and then one of the property owners wanted to speak or clarify on one of them. So it just would probably be more efficient to just put them to the top of the agenda and go through them quickly. And if one of us has a question, okay, we have an opportunity to bring that up. You have the opportunity also to make any kind of distinguishing points of something that maybe has changed even from when we received our materials to that day of the hearing. So I think we can be efficient and run them through quickly without maybe, because almost it seemed like when we had to split them up that was more complicated than it was if they did just started out separate.
Yeah, and we could even put in the script for the chair something to the effect of the parties the applicant has agreed to the conditions presented by staff unless the board or the parties request to speak or discuss, we will not do or unless the board requests a presentation from staff, we won't do one. Something like that.
Speak now or
Could-
forever hold thy peace.
Yeah, could be in the script, something to that effect. Right. Yeah.
Do you think we need a public acknowledgement by the applicant that they understand the conditions or?
I think that might be good, just for the record.
Certainly if they're here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if they're not here, then we assume that they consent. But
Oops, sorry. I'm sorry, Gary. Do we need
I was asking, Hillary and Marty, and anybody in the room, their opinion, if we needed, because in this somewhat abbreviated process, we still wanted, even though you wrote in text on the agenda that they had agreed, that we wanted to confirm that verbally in the meeting. So,
yeah, that could be part of the script as well. Is the applicant present? Could the applicant come up or be sworn in and state that they agree or not agree?
So we're all comfortable just keeping them regular items.
Right,
Okay.
but trying to move them to the front of the agenda.
Do you order the agenda based on arrivals and when people get their submissions in, or based on complexity?
We do typically put them in order of the case number. So case numbers are ascribed first come, first serve, if you will. But we do have a little bit of flexibility for things that are quick. And we could certainly look at doing that. And then Lori and I can work on some text for the chair agenda that would cover the items that you were talking about. That's why I'm listening intently.
Those are the additional items I had. Do you have anything more?
I do not.
Okay.
I have nothing.
Board members, anything more?
We are having a meeting, anticipated agenda items for next month.
We have 3638 North High. And then we have a deck addition on 114 South High.
Okay. All right.
All right,
Is there a motion to adjourn?
so moved. I moved to adjourn.
That was fast. I'll second.